elfu moja kwa wale ambao wanatupatia solidarity, na katika itikadi ya Septemba kuna masuala mengi ambayo yanazungumziwa. And a very good afternoon to you, our viewers, wherever you're watching us from. And thank you for joining us on yet another episode of our CPK Bulletin. My name is Sefusani, and I will be your host throughout the program. And today on the program, we are delighted to have our first woman on the hot seat, and she's going to tell us her name and where she comes from and what her role is. So thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us. Maybe you can tell our viewers what your name is and where you come from and the type of organizing that you engage in.
Okay. My name is Fatma Khafagy. I come from Egypt. I'm a member of the political bureau of the People's Socialist Alliance, which is an opposition party in Egypt that was established in 2011, right after the Egyptian revolution. And I'm delighted to be here in Nairobi and to meet with the Communist Party. I'm also a feminist, and I'm visiting Nairobi to attend feminist annual conference.
Yes.
And happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And as you said, you're visiting Nairobi for the Africa Women's Development and Communication Network, which is also known as Femnet. And of course, this is a channel for, a communication network. So thank you very much, even for the invite to the Femnet event. And maybe you can just tell us a bit about Femnet and about this event that is going on in Nairobi that has led you to be here today.
Okay. Femnet is a very well-known feminist organization that covers all of Africa. My organization in Egypt had a relationship with feminists since a long time, in the 80s actually. But then it was like stopped for many years. Then it just happened that I came to know Memory, the executive director of Femnet, since 2 years back, because we are both in a global committee called the Civil Society Advisory Group to the Core Group to advise UN Women and the Mexican and French governments on the Generation Equality Forum to put a new feminist agenda for women in the coming 5 years. So that's how, my memory also of Femnet was revived through Memory, and we became, active together, and they also sort of helped us to have an application on the mobile to make it accessible to women in Egypt to complain about sexual harassment they experience in the public.
And when you talk about, your experience with Femnet since the 80s and how you've been able to organize women, especially in Egypt, to speak out against sexual abuse, against, gender-based violence. But we also see that you are in the office of the Ombudsman and Gender. Would you like to tell us about your experience in that office and, the problems that you have faced, the challenges and the issues that the women bring to you in that office specifically?
Yeah, that was a very rich experience actually, because the office, we had many lawyers who would receive women, and women can complain about any abuse, about any gender discrimination that they experience at the workplace, any form of violence that they experience. So we were really getting many different complaints from all over Egypt. And then we try actually to solve as many complaints as we can. So if she was not really promoted for no reason at her work, then we actually find why and who is the reason for that, and then also go to her boss and then try to solve it. For some complaints, it's so difficult. Like if she's coming to complain about anything concerning family law and the implementation even of family law.
Yes.
So we try to reform, the laws that are gender discriminatory, and we write to the Prime Minister why this law is gender discriminatory and what our recommendations to reform the law. And we try to push this as much as we can so that, women really, I mean, that would be like, hundreds of thousands of women can take their rights if this law has been changed. We manage, like in the insurance law, for instance, to have it, gender equal. For the family law is still a battle that we are really sort of fighting now. But it was really, it's like, I mean, my work at the Ombudsman, it's like, having a clear picture of what are the problems of women in all over Egypt. It's like you're doing a daily research because, you listen to women from rural areas, from slum areas, from educated women, from all women, what are the problems, and you investigate also the problems so you know what are real and what are not real. And you try to solve it. So I think it was, like I worked with the UN for 15 years, but my work with the Ombudsman Office was the most enriching, experience.
And when you've spoken about retrogressive laws or the family law that is in Egypt, which I think was established in the year 1929, and we see that the circumstances at that time in 1929, compared to now, we're in 2021, must be very, very different. But these are still the laws that are, upheld. They are very rigid, and it's very difficult, to go around it, with such things as someone being able to divorce their wife in absentia. Can you tell us a bit about, this family law and some of the rigidities of the law and how it affects women in that area?
I think, Egypt really has the worst family law.
Yes.
And it's so difficult to change it. And even, to change bits of it, we have to really struggle for years. But the idea is that because it was put in 1929,
yes,
the whole, circumstances for both men and women have very much changed.
Yes.
So the philosophy of the law has to be changed, because the old philosophy was saying the men spend on women and women have to obey in return. Maybe that's when women were not educated, when women were not working. Maybe this was a logic at, in the 20s of the last century. But now women are really working. Sometimes they gain much more than men, and they also working at home, so they have double burden.
Yes.
Women are educated. Women are, could be politically active. So this whole philosophy have to be, moving from she has to obey because he spends, to sharing life, to form a good family, peaceful family with, raising good children and so on. So that's what we're fighting now, that we were not satisfied with the small changes that we fought for, and few of them were realized. But now we want to change the whole philosophy so that we can review the whole, the many articles of the law. It's difficult because it's always been said it's based on Sharia.
Yes.
But Sharia is the way how we interpret, religion, and we should not leave it, to men, since also centuries back, who interpreted Sharia in a very conservative way. So the idea is that, okay, if you want to keep it, now we have, two stands in Egypt.
Yes.
If you want to keep it, that this is based on Sharia, let's talk about the right interpretation of Sharia.
Yes.
If we want, because also Egypt has over 10% Christian women. So if we want to have it a secular law that is good for everybody, let's have a secular law.
Okay.
And those who want to have it a religious law, they can choose this, but give women the option, you know, you can have this or that. So this is the struggle that some of the feminists now have it, and because I mean, really religious people do not want family law to be changed, because
Yes.
religious people are all men, and it's their interest to be, you know, superior than women,
Yes.
to command women, to have women obey them. So that's why they're very much, you know, against the change. But we don't give up. We've been struggling, you know, since 1930s. Our mother struggled, and we are
Maybe they
struggling.
a time
And the
should
new
come
generation,
for a change.
and hopefully the new generation would have it changed.
Yes. So would you, in that case, would you say that religion is used as a tool to subdue, you know, women, for example, in this case?
Yes, but I think, I mean, if women are left to read the Quran, for instance, and understand religion by themselves, which something actually Islam calls for. I mean, we don't have priests, for instance. We're not supposed to have priests. So it's a direct relationship. But because of illiteracy, we have very high illiteracy rate in Egypt, like 30% female illiteracy. So they can't really explain it to themselves. So they receive the interpretation from men who are, you know, have an interest of really suppressing women. So that's the problem, you know. And these men, the clergymen that, you know, want to suppress women, have it, you know, have all the media open to them. They have all the mosques open to them, so they can influence, you know, women also very easily. So the point also, we want to reform this religious discourse because it is not helping in our changes.
Yeah. So when we move from that and we talk about body and sexuality for women, the control of women's bodies and sexuality is embedded in a neo-colonialist and in a racist and heteronormative logic of capital, which is led by, you know, corporations and often in collaboration with the state, which use the bodies of, you know, impoverished women in parts of the global south as guinea pigs for experiment, as was the case with so many of the policies carried out, for example, in the name of population control. So through various widespread, you know, experiences, we explore how women's bodies have been historically subjected, for example, through the use of violence, to the needs of capitalist accumulation, and specifically for the reorganization of paid and unpaid work, especially when you talk about, for example, women as in this day and age, as opposed to the 1920s, having to go to work in the office, then coming back home and getting to do domestic work as well. Just that burden that is being put, you know, on the women. What would be your take on that? The domestic care, the work that women put in, and the capitalist regime that is pushing that for women.
And this has really very much appeared during COVID, and still is, because you know, women were so much burdened by, you know, all the work they have to do inside and outside the house, and men were not asked to do things. And I think this, as you said, came from the colonial era, actually, of, you know, even when women went out to work, there was a division of what women can do and what men can do, and they put, you know, the jobs that generate good salaries for men, and, you know, the ones that generate bad or low salaries for women. And we inherited this because of capitalism, really, so that, you know, that's how it works until there is something when men are not around. Then they pushed women to take over, you know, the difficult jobs as well, or to replace men. But if men are back, then women should be taking over, you know, the jobs with less pay. So that's, you know, what we're trying to do now is that in the budget, there is not enough, money for social services, because the government is not paying for that, because it depends on women actually to carry out the responsibilities that the government should be providing.
Yes.
Sorry.
It's fine.
So we are calling for increasing, the social services budget item. We are also have to change the image and have to change the stereotype. Like, care work is a job of women. No, you as a man also can actually take care of your children, can do household work with a woman, and so on. So there is a lot of work on changing the stereotype as well.
In our society, in the African society at large, which Egypt is part of, the value of a woman is based on their reproductive and working capacity. And in this case, we can see their role even within polygamy, which is used, as a tool of production, especially for the women. So if a woman cannot work, then other women can do the work on her behalf. And this way, then the man or the society is always supplied. So in order to maintain the expropriation of women's energy, the cycles of transference of care among women are created. And, labor has greater value for accumulation. So when we're talking about bride price or bride service is practiced, whereby a man transfers capital to the woman's family in order to acquire her and her labor primarily, and also maybe for the children that this woman is going to bear. The main purpose is that they're going to provide labor, or they're going to provide capital. So is the value of a woman based on her reproductive and working capacity?
Yes, very much so, especially for poor families and poor men, because actually also the problem in my country is that there is a very high rate of working children. And the funny thing is that a child has more opportunity of work, like in the fields, like in, mechanic workshops, like in so many, for a child, because the employers exploit the child easier than exploiting a grown-up. So the child can have more opportunities of work than a grown-up, than the father. So if the man is marrying more than one wife and is getting, many children, then he puts, instead of putting them in schools, so he let them work and bring the money for him, actually. So it is a very sad situation, because also it's abuse of the child rights as well. And as you said, all the decisions concerning the woman's body, of her, how many children she should have, when, should she have, if she gets, girl children, then she should have boys, and so on. It's all within a capitalistic mentality of, how to make use of this, both the mother and the children, in really making him survive and have the power also, because he gets the money and he controls it for himself. So to get the power through exploiting, wives and children.
Okay. And of course, in a socialist society, which we are both calling for, from the Communist Party of Kenya and also the Social Party, which you're coming from, this would be different, where there would not be, exploitation of women as reproductive or, labor. To provide labor. And now moving on, when you talk about, a socialist society, you spoke about the revolution in Egypt earlier, which happened in the year 2011, and it led to the birth of your party. Can you tell us a bit about that history and how it came about that the party was born at such a revolutionary time in Egypt?
Yeah. Actually, some of us came from an opposition political party that was becoming very weak. So some of us, the members of this party, before the revolution, they were, furious against the regime. And also furious against their own party because it's not really sort of struggling as it should struggle. And we were, and then some of us were really sort of also not belonging to political parties like myself, but also had my friends actually who are politically active, and was also furious of what's happening during the last years of Mubarak, and also the very abusive role of the police at that time, yes. Especially how the police treated young people on the streets, yes. How they the very much of disrespect that they showed and practiced against many people in Egypt, and we thought that we have to really participate in the revolution. Okay. So some of us was, especially the young people, were also active with other young people who called on the online, yes. on the internet. Yes. Egyptians that we have to go to Tahrir Square in order to revolt against what's happening especially from the police, yes. and the Ministry of Interior, and to change the minister. So we came actually together, and also we thought that we have, the people from the old opposition party and the new party that came together. We said we must have a new political party, and we must register it quickly in order also to be legally active in all what's happening. But until we registered, we said, we knew, who are us, whom we should have as leaders, and whom should we, get and also attract to be in the political party. But until we registered, we were all in the square. We were all, doing everything you can think of, making speeches, cleaning the square, lamenting the wounded, getting food and tents for people who want to stay overnight in the square, and so on. So we actually formed the party during the revolution, getting together and also meeting and maybe at night when some of the people went home, yes. and we're not in the revolution, then we discuss how our political party is going to look like, how are we going to organize ourselves, how are we going to collect, because we had to collect the application from many people in the different areas of Egypt. So we divided our work. You travel to this place in order to get the signature. You travel until we really got, the 8,000 I think we had to do, and round to register as a political party. So we call ourselves, we are the party that was born from the womb of the revolution, and ever since, we were, very active in politics. We were also in the parliament. We were at the days, or the very few years after the revolution, and we had, sometimes, setbacks in the revolution. Sometimes we, good things, and that's why our slogan was saying, the revolution is ongoing. So there is no stop to the revolution until we really reach what we want to do.
That is very powerful. One of the slogans we have at the Communist Party of Kenya is that our loyalty is with the masses and with the people. And it's very intriguing to see what the power of, the masses and the people can do when they stand up together, like what happened in 2011 in Egypt. But one of the issues that I think has come out from that revolution is that, of course, the then President president, who was Hosni Mubarak, was able to be ousted from power, and you were able to present the issues of the interior minister at that point in time. But now the military regime came into power, and there was seen to be a vacuum such that people went to the streets for a revolution, but in as much as they went for a revolution, there was no political structure of what next, after the revolution. That yes, we want a revolution and we want all these people out, but after these people are out, what happens? And because of that, then there became a vacuum, where now there was no bus, maybe there was no political party to drive the people to what they wanted. So what would you say about that and now the political situation in Egypt, even after the revolution, which was seen to be something that, would give people a better life? Did they get that better life? And if not, why?
Yeah, actually, I mean, there were two things. The people were fed up of Mubarak's regime, especially when we knew that he wants to give the regime to his son, that his son is going to inherit the regime. So everybody was just fed up, people wanted to voice this no matter what are the consequences. Secondly, also during Mubarak and even before him, during Sadat, they made every effort to destroy any organization. So, opposition party were struggling long time ago, and there was not one opposition party that you can say, yes, this can really take over and reign. But I mean, we're happy to have the revolution because we thought, okay, now almost all the Egyptian people said that this kind of ruling us or this kind of regimes are not accepted. And then we had, the slogan, I think we said, we want dignity, we want justice, and we want to be like satisfied and we want quality living, not that sort
dignified
of living,
life.
Dignified life. So we thought that can lead us to a regime which maybe was a bit naive, but unfortunately then the Muslim Brothers took over because also it was the only it was not a recognized party, but they worked underground in a way very organized. So the numbers was great, and they went also to Tahrir Square, so they were able to take it over. But then when we got fed up also from the religious regime and we thought of throwing it out, then it became like still we have a chance now of organizing, but not, I mean, we have to really think about the coming regime so that the present president formed like a group, we call it the council, the interim council, and it had good people. And we thought that this council would really sit together because it had people from different ideologies and so on, and they can really come up with options that the people can vote for and choose the regime. But unfortunately, also we were mistaken, and it was not the kind of plan that we thought it will happen. And as you said, there was a vacuum because there was no other, organized group that can take over, and that's why we fell into another, undemocratic regime.
So you agree that, having an organized, for example, political party like a revolutionary party would have been ideal in case of a revolution.
Yeah.
And we've seen rampant abuse and violation of human rights in Egypt, especially when it comes to, the importation of arms. Previously, you spoke about the youth profiling by the regime and the police brutality, or you talk about the women's rights. Would you tell us a bit about, the human rights violations?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Yes, I mean the situation is not really good because there is some sort of turning, the regime is against the revolution and maybe scared also of any other revolution that could happen. And also it succeeded in turning some of the Egyptians to also hate the revolution. I mean, especially, businessmen and people who are really having an interest of being in such a maybe an abusive regime even. So that's, but I can, I mean, for instance, in our own party, we had a young woman, and the year 2015, our party wanted to celebrate in very few numbers the anniversary of the revolution. Yes. So some of us went with flowers to Tahrir Square in order to commemorate, people who also lost their life during the revolution. And this young woman was killed by a policeman. And fortunately, because also the regime denied that she was killed by the police, but fortunately there were journalists who had their mobile
footage,
and they had the footage that proves that the young officer was given by his general an instruction to kill this woman in particular because she was very active. She was from Alexandria, young woman of 30 years old with a young child, and she used to work with people on the street and with the, working children, with people from working class who were abused also. So they knew her, and that's why they didn't want any of the youth who have influence on others actually. So she was killed, and we had suffered many years in order to have the regime confess that she was killed by this policeman. And
yes.
we had to have campaigns, international campaigns.
Yes.
We had support from the European Parliament, from the British Parliament, from the Italian Parliament, from civil society and political parties all over the globe, because also it was a very sad thing to happen, not only because she was politically active, but because she was, a young woman, a mother, and maybe this in Egypt also has really raised the anger of many Egyptians why to kill this woman, until at last he took a sentence of 5 years only, which is also very small. So that's just an example of really how abusive of human rights and women's rights.
And why do you think the abuse of human rights is so rampant, in the country? Is it because there are some capitalists who have interests and, they're trying to push this, or they're looking the other way? Why do you think that the abuse of human rights is so rampant, in Egypt?
I think, I mean, a bit of it is about fear, especially, I mean, people who talk, openly about, especially about political rights,
yes.
are not in good state. I mean, they are in prison, they lose their jobs, they are threatened and so on. So part of it is of being afraid, actually. Part of it is that, people who have benefited from such regime, I mean, the capitalists and,
yes.
and neoliberals, thought of, why are we talking about political rights? I mean, let's talk about, economic and social rights. Maybe we can, ask for better housing. Maybe we can ask for, less prices for food. But these are much more important, because to them it does not, it's not a problem, actually.
Yes,
They
yes.
don't want to, they don't have an ideology of, accept how to make money,
Yes.
and so on. So they think people are asking for rights, and and many people don't think, that rights are complementary. You can't say, okay, you can have this right, but you don't have this right, and so on. And they are just, as long as they're making money, it's okay. So it's a very complicated situation, actually.
The cost of living in Egypt at the moment is very high. We see the taxing of the middle and low strata of society being very high, and they carry the burden, of running the country. But the prices of commodities are higher than, most of the countries in the world that are even first class. Why would you say that these circumstances are in the country? And how do you think the people can unravel themselves from such high cost of living?
Yeah. Because there's so much also investments, like on infrastructure,
Yes.
on building, for instance, a new capital now that is really costing Egypt, billions of pounds. Of importing arms, so there's so much money that is needed. We are, how to say, Egypt has a population of over 100 million people, and if you invent taxes every day, like what's happening now, the price of petrol, for instance,
Yes.
and we're supposedly having petrol, is increasing like every 3 months. Price of electricity, price of water, price of education, so price of health treatment, and so on. So it is because I think the way they calculate it, if you get
Yes,
taxes from 50 million people a day, you become rich.
that's true.
So that's, and they don't want to upset the capitalists and so on. So they don't tax them much, actually. So it is the burden of the poor and the middle classes who are paying this because they're populous.
Yes.
And they are controlled. So if you don't pay, you are in trouble. You could be in prison if you don't pay the taxes that the government is asking you for. So I think it's the only way to offset the many spending on luxurious things that we don't need now, you know.
And speaking of Egypt, we have some women who are very revolutionary. And I would not forget to mention Nawal El-Saadawi, who was a very prolific writer. But not only that, not only was she a prolific writer, but she was able to amplify the issues of women, such as female genital mutilation, in such a society that talking about such things is taboo. What would you say about women like Nawal El-Saadawi? And are there other revolutionary women, coming up in Egypt to speak out about such issues affecting women?
Nawal Saadawi was really a phenomenon because she had the courage of really to speak about, women's concerns and problems since a long time.
Yes.
And unfortunately, she was not sort of esteemed or by any of our regimes, actually. She was much more sort of accredited outside Egypt and not inside Egypt,
Yes.
unfortunately. Now what I see, there are women, but not as courageous as women Saadawi. There are feminists that are really also strong and voice their opinions. There also risk some things like, some of the leaders of feminist NGOs, they close down their NGOs, they ban them from travel and so on. But what I see also very intelligent from the young women, because they can I mean, the regime can't control everything online, actually. So they form actually groups of young women together for solidarity and also leadership. And they talk very openly about the abuse they are experiencing, because there are many girls who are raped actually by sons of businessmen actually, and nothing has happened to these men, by their maybe professors at universities, teachers in schools and so on. So they come together and talk about their own experience and support each other. And some of them, I remember like a group called Police Assault, and young women also take the risk of really publishing all this with the names of who raped them and when and how it happened and so on, and also encouraging them through feminist NGOs that have legal aid and have lawyers to file court cases, even if they are old cases actually, in order that people know that not any woman is going to shut up about the abuse and the rape and the sexual harassment they are exposed to. So I have so much hope in the young women actually who are coming together intelligently and trying to escape also the risk of this, but really they have very good results now. We have cases now that are seen. Some of the abusers have been punished, not all of them. I mean, they're very rich, of the sons of the very rich businessmen, still not yet.
Yes.
But they are talking about it and raising awareness of all the Egyptians of how, abusive this thing is and how abusive the justice system in Egypt is actually of covering up for these people as well.
So speaking out is very important in whichever form, including literature. And when you speak of literature, there's, another upcoming writer who is Samir Amin, and we were talking about him earlier, who is trying to talk about such issues, but, more on the political sphere. You could tell us more about that?
Samir Amin is really an icon, who is, very much known to many leftist Marxists and communists all over the world. He is Egyptian, who lived in Egypt and immigrated to France, but used to come to Egypt and has very good relationship with many Egyptian Marxists as well. And he thinks that we have to fight for socialism and Marxism internationally. It's not enough to fight, the American imperialism locally, but it has to be fought internationally. And he was the one who's written about the Fifth International and calling for to start this movement, international movement, to call for, political parties who are alike from the South, from
Global South.
15 parties, to work together in order to put a global plan of action of how to fight the new imperialism now, how to fight for the sake of people actually through leftist regimes, and not to repeat what's happening of the capitalism that we all, and colonialism that we suffered from, and how to come up with a new way of all people gaining their rights, their equal rights in political and economic regime, because he is also an economist originally, so he's very much concerned about the quality of life of all people, mentioning that we have the resources internationally to make people live well. But why all this poverty? Actually, because of exploitation, because of imperialism, because of capitalism, and so on. So, some from my party who used also to be very close with Samir Amin and to think alike are thinking very much of how to make this realize. It's unfortunate that Samir Amin actually died last year without really sort of participating or leading the plan of action. But still many people, his students, his colleagues and so on are thinking of, he is the guru who has put this ethics, and we should really sort of how to implement it.
That's very great and very well articulated. And you spoke about international solidarity, of course, which is one of the pillars of socialism and communism around the world.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, one of the anthems, our anthem actually that we use is the International, which you can check out on our YouTube page at Communist Party of Kenya, of course, which speaks about the international nature and international solidarity. And you yourselves have received, international solidarity from different areas of the world. And also you've been able to form a revolutionary women's league for, the Arab states and countries around that. Tell us a bit about that as we come to a close.
We formed actually after the revolution in Egypt and Tunisia, and also other countries were on the verge of revolution or reform or major reform, like Morocco. Lebanon also had a revolution, but after Egypt and Tunisia. So we thought of forming a group of women who are members in socialist and social democratic parties to exchange our experience. And we were, about 30 women from Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, Lebanon, and Jordan, and to exchange experience and also encourage our parties to have women either have gender quota for women or to put women in the decision-making positions in the political parties, and also to address gender issues inside the party actually, and to be vocal about gender equality issues also in their speeches, in their discourse, in the advocacy, and so on. So before COVID-19, we used to meet together like twice a year to also decide on which subjects we're going to work on, and also to be trained and then go back to our parties and train other women also of what we've been trained on. So we worked first on training ourselves of how to convince our party leaders of the importance of gender issues inside the party and then also outside in the whole country. And we actually participated with other trainers from the UK and from Slovenia and other mid-European countries who had revolutions on making manual, on messages to convince political parties to have more women in decision-making positions. And we go back and implement this in our parties. And then we decided again, when we did some studies, is that women do not politically participate because they also face lots of forms of violence actually in their lives. So we decided to address this issue. So we started also in our own party to go around and also advocate for combating gender-based violence and making women from all over to talk about the abuse actually they experience and the importance to talk about it in order to be able that we can have solidarity to solve this things. So that's, I mean, we are still surviving. We are, after COVID, we're meeting virtually, but we're supposed now to meet actually physically very soon, and we are planning to document this network, because it's very important for the whole Arab region actually, how we came together, what we did, because some of us in the political parties have become parliamentarians in some of the countries. Some have become like gender advisors to ministers and so on. And I have become internationally recognized as a feminist to represent the Arab countries in the new feminist agenda for the coming. We're working on that for the past 2 years and putting a new agenda actually by the end of the coming 3 years, working with UN agencies, with the governments of France and Mexico, and of having the youth also participating in putting this agenda. So this was with memory from feminists in Kenya as well. So I think even the era has really had an impact of how we change, how we really strengthen each other by solidarity, and also how we spread what we have started with to the youth in our parties. So now the youth have really increased in numbers. They are taking over decision-making positions in the different. We come from 6 political parties.
That's amazing. And this conversation has just reminded me of Western Sahara, which is Africa's last colony. And we had a feature story in Western Sahara where most of the women were facing abuse by Morocco militia. And, they were raped and they were beaten on the streets and, generally just facing a very difficult time, which we know our Western Sahara is going through at the moment. What do you have to say about, the Western Sahara, and what would you say to the women and the people in Western Sahara who are going through such a difficult moment?
I know very little about the subject actually, because also the Moroccans we have, they don't talk about it much. I mean, very few of them talk of the problem, but I'm really, and I must confess, maybe this is a shortage that we should be looking into that much more than what we're doing now, because this is also a question that comes, very often as well.
All right. Any solidarity message to the women in Western Sahara?
Yes, I want to tell them that we will really be much more knowledgeable and raise awareness about what you are suffering from, and we are, against any abuse of power, against any of your rights, and we would like actually to know more, to also support you more, and we would like, we will search for you actually to join us also and be, one in our struggle as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fatma Khafagy, for joining us today and for so much insight on the political sphere, on feminism. And of course, before you leave, we have some material here that we would like to give to you.
Thank you.
To the social political party in Egypt to foster our relations. Yes, so I would like to present to you with a few of them, and then we can close the subject.
Thank you so much. I should have got you something, also from my party, but I was, in such a hurry.
We can receive it at a later date. So this is an album for the songs of the struggle, our revolutionary songs we've done as the Communist Party of Kenya. So you can share with your people. You could. Then here we have this is Msimamo wa Communist Party. Msimamo is a Swahili word for what do we stand for as the Communist Party of Kenya. You can have that as well. And over here we have the manifesto. Just hold on to it.
Okay.
The manifesto, yes, of the Communist Party of Kenya, which of course you can share with the people. And I think I'll just, thank you so much. So this is the charter for the Communist Party. There's two. We have the nomination and election rules of the Communist Party of Kenya and the code of conduct of the Communist Party of Kenya. And then lastly, we have the constitution of the Communist Party of Kenya. So I'd like to hand this over to you.
Thank you.
Officially. Thank you so much for gracing us, and we hope to have better relations with you. Also, we have a cap from the Communist Party of Kenya. This is a part of our propaganda material, so maybe we'll have you wear the cap. And it's a t-shirt as well from the Communist Party of Kenya. Yes, and the t-shirts are available. The polo t-shirt goes for 500 shillings and the cap goes for 200 shillings, and of course the rest of the Communist Party of Kenya propaganda as well. So kindly reach out to us in the comments and we will be able to respond to you. Thank you very much. Yes, here you go.
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you to our viewers for joining us on yet another episode of our CPK Bulletin. I've been your host, Sefusani, and it's always a pleasure to be with you. Kindly join us next week for another episode of our bulletin. Remember to follow us on our social media pages at Communist KE on Twitter, Communist Party of Kenya on Facebook, and Communist Party on YouTube. From here, it's been goodbye and good luck. Adios.
Very good.